I know that there's always on the horizon something better to do, another mission to accomplish, another market to get into, and I think that's one of the things that really drives me. But that I'm here, it's like there's always another warfighter that needs better technologies. Like, how do we get it to them?
Yeah.
How do we help our customers deliver? And like, you all see that next one coming, and so
we said it from day one of this journey.
Yeah.
There should be more second fronts.
Yeah.
There should be more pathways for software to get where it needs to go.
You build it and give it away. You land roads.
Yes.
yeah,
It's a public
agreed.
benefit.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweatt, and my Second Front homies as we dismantle the mundane and cut through the bureaucratic bullshit to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Are you ready to get weird?
Yeah, story of Second Front. So Second Front actually started quite a ways before Tyler and I got here and the rest of us got here, and it was really started by two Marines who, after fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq, realized they're not getting the best quality tech, and they're like, hey, how do we get better tech into the government, into DoD? How do we cross that valley of death? And so the original Second Front was really looking at how do you solve the acquisitions process to get it across. Somewhere during that process, I ran into the founder, Peter Dixon, and when I retired from the military, he's like, hey, why don't you come over, help us out, solve some of these problems? And at the time, it was...
Where'd you retire from in the military?
Where I retired from? I retired from Kessel Run. I was the commander of Kessel
Need
Run.
to make sure that we
You want to drop that in?
got that dropped in there. Can't go that far outside Kessel Run.
Yeah, I was colonel in the Air Force, retired from Kessel Run. And at the time, I'd moved to Estonia thinking, hey, I want to get in cybersecurity. And then COVID hit. I had no job, nothing to do. And Peter's like, I'll let you work remote. And so I joined Second Front quarter time going, yeah, let's solve some of this acquisition stuff. And honestly, within the first few weeks or months, I was like, hey, Peter, I think there's a better thing to do. This acquisition stuff is really tough, but at least the cybersecurity stuff's manageable. Why don't we solve that portion of the valley of death of how do you get software through the accreditation process, get it live on networks? And Peter's like, yeah, look into that, try it out. And around the same time, Peter, I'd met Tyler once before in a very awkward situation, but Peter's like, I know this Tyler guy. I think you know him. Go talk to him. Maybe he'll help out with this as well. So I call up Tyler. I think I'm walking around the streets of Dubrovnik at the time.
It was unclear and poorly communicated that Enrique was a quarter employee at this time and not
In which direction?
the new CTO.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we started talking to Tyler. He came on board, hired one engineer at the time, and we're like, you know what, let's go at it. And so the company in the early days, 2020, 2021 timeframe, was still kind of working the acquisitions piece, but in parallel, we're building out what became Game Warden, the idea of like a certification accreditation platform. And really at the end of September of 2021, we made a corporate decision, and we said, like, you know what, we're going all in on this. Like, this is the future. And we actually abandoned that first product line and went all in on Game Warden as the core product of the company.
When was that?
September 1st, 2021.
I don't know, I didn't write it down. Sounds right.
Yeah. How much of this did you, like, going to that first meeting to meet the CTO, how much did you know this was going to become Game Warden and not the original Second Front?
I think enough people have heard this story. Like, Enrique and Peter kind of caught me as I was transitioning out of one company and into another, and was in like a somewhat comfortable position. I mean, it was like I was going to go to a big GovCon, and I told my wife I was going to a big GovCon. I told my wife like it was gonna be great, cubicles and 40 hours and not as much travel, and then hadn't gotten paid in like 4 weeks, and she's like, "Well, do you not have a job?" And I was like, "Oh, I just work for the startup. They didn't know I started yet." So that's about how the story started for me.
Yeah, that's about right. Early stage startup, I think both of us had the same issue where we joined the company, we thought we were employees, and only found out a month later we didn't get paid that. Somehow, like,
You think you got it bad?
our onboarding had not quite gone through the process, but yeah, we solved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and then you were next. How was your onboarding and welcome into this pirate ship?
Tyler hired me in July of 2021 with the promise that I was coming on to sell this Game Warden. We hadn't decided yet that we were going all in on Game Warden. That happened in September. And that was pretty much the process. I showed up, and the product that we were intended to sell We were obviously still building at the time and really still figuring out the launch. But it also gave us a little bit of maneuver space on the growth and sales and BD side to like figure out what we're selling and figure out how we need to sell it and how we need to position it and
like what
an ICP is and what the problem is and who are we actually solving a problem for and where's that pain point most acute. So we had some time to do market research the first couple of months, which was, I think in hindsight, actually quite beneficial.
Agreed.
Yeah, and actually, I'll jump in on the pain point. Like, so when we came up with the idea of game warden, the pain point we were looking at is a lot of us had been in the government, and I'd run a program office at Kessel Run, as Tyler loves to hear me say that. And we were
Every time he says it, an airman becomes an innovator. Carry on.
So we had really figured out how to write our own code, deploy it through pipelines, get it out in production, accredited in a matter of like weeks or days or sometimes hours. But even as the commander, I'm like, hey, there's this great commercial product, we should use that. And my own accreditor's like, no, that's like a year-long assessment process. You're not going to get that in. So we ended up wasting a lot of time with coders rebuilding what exists in the commercial world. We try to rebuild internally because at least we could get our stuff accredited. And so it's when I got out and when I was talking to Tyler, talking to Peter, I'm like, hey, why don't we solve that? Why don't we open up the world of software in the Department of Defense to commercial vendors so they can get accredited quickly rather than these year and a half long processes. So that's kind of the first pain point. We thought it was going to be like...
I just lived it.
Yeah.
Coming from a startup that had won, some SBIR, some intelligence community contracts, had, at the time what I would have called like early sort of product mission fit, and couldn't for the life of us figure out how to get the software into a spot where it could be fed operational data by the customers. Just for the life of us.
Yeah.
We had former congressmen as advisors. We had all the bells and whistles you put around companies. We had one each. Couldn't freaking figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and about, so even before this is when I met you, when you were still in uniform.
Yeah.
When you were at Kessel Run, and then maybe when you were still at DIU, I was at Naval X, and we did, there it is.
Joint Service Innovation.
Yeah.
Come on.
So we did 3 trips to Silicon Valley, going to like one of major VCs, and spent all day with them, and they would come in and pitch their portfolio, just straight portcos, 8 of them in a row, like 30 minutes a pop, bang, 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 and all of them were software companies because that's what VCs were investing in like this is like 2019 time frame. Like they're just investing in software, and then the last one of the day would always be some like crazy hardware play that made no sense, and you'd be like, well, why is this one in here? And they're like, oh, like that was just sort of like we're taking a flyer on it because hardware is cool. But to Enrique's point, like we couldn't adopt any of the software. Like the hardware was the only one that like
you grabbed
the
the
government
value
folks were like,
butt.
oh, we want to talk to that one.
Yeah.
They were usually the craziest of the bunch. But that was the piece that we're like, oh, we can actually do that. The software, we're like, I don't know how to like.
Yeah.
We don't know
Well,
how to
it's
deploy.
everybody's
They're all
problem, but it's
SaaS.
nobody's responsibility. And it's not a ding on like an org. It's a feature and a bug maybe of like how the department's organized, that everybody's got sort of like vertically integrated but like operates horizontally. And so everybody feels the problem. Nobody's actually empowered to go solve it.
Well, they
And
might
like
be
that's-
empowered. They might be empowered to solve it locally.
Locally,
just
sorry,
for
I
them.
mean locally,
Yeah,
but
right.
then that compounds the complexity,
Correct.
right? You'll have
Organization.
drift that's occurring.
Yeah.
The same way, like if you're running a platform and you're running it in 5 different places and there's micro changes that are happening, it just starts to drift. If I've got all local policy exemptions and everyone's locally empowered to solve a problem, I'm gonna have 100 fucking holes.
Yeah.
They're all gonna be different.
Yep.
Right? That's nightmare fuel.
Let's go back to that summer of 21, making
Yeah.
that. I mean, you kind of glossed over this, like we built Game Warden, and then the company just pivots to that. Like I'm sure that was a much harder challenge, and I wasn't here for it, and you had just gotten here. Like, how quickly did you guys realize the traction there, and like what was that actual decision point? Because like coming in 2 years after this, watching the iteration, like one of the things I've been most impressed with Second Front was making that decision of realizing like this is the tool that's going to give us the growth that we need, and that's what the company is really centered around. But that must have been a hard.
History's written by the victors, right? Like it took us.
It was painful.
Oh, it was a nightmare.
I'm sure.
Oh, I thought I was gonna rip us apart. It was hard, We technically made the decision probably 100 fucking times before we took action on it. There's a ton of emotion.
Yep.
Right? It's somebody's baby. It's someone's idea. It's just.
Yeah.
We were probably 6 months too late because it takes that much time. And even as a small startup, you have internal pressures, internal bureaucracies, internal personalities that we had known
I'll call it
even
12
earlier.
months.
12 months too late.
12 months too late?
I think 12 months
know.
too late. Like, if you add
I'll
6
take
months
a
too late and then
pivot
6 months.
that hard is not easy.
Yeah.
No,
And
it
by the way,
was-
it's amazing after you've already raised your seed round, going back to your investors and say, I know we raised on this one product, we're throwing it away, we're going to a different route. They
Yeah.
love to hear that in board meetings. But I think that where it really came down to, part of it was that first year, when we decided to start the product and before we decided to make the pivot, a lot of it was engagement with the government. Again, we look about that product market fit. It was really engaging with CIOs, accreditors, saying, hey, this is our idea. Is this even possible? Could we do this? Would you support this? And it actually took a long time that we really felt comfortable that, yes, if we did this, we had the buy-in from the
It took us
bureaucracy.
12 months.
Yeah.
You know, I know I give you shit for your, like, being an innovator or something, but, like, you're highly respected, hyper-connected software executive in the department. Right? Like, the company was well-connected. Like, I had been doing BD and growth in around the space. Like, we did a pretty extensive Rolodex and policy knowledge, and it still took us 12 months to even get someone to say, yeah, you should try that, and I'll back you just trying it.
Yep. Agree. I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why we did not pivot earlier. It was kind of a little bit of lack of confidence of, is this even possible? Because at the time, nobody had tried it.
So who were the first customers? Like, where did you get that? Who did you find people that like believed that you could build this?
Very first two customers were, and still customers today and running operationally, Ultra ATS to support their, originally their RAIN application and then later, subsequently, their ADSI application.
Yep.
And then the other first customer was OpsLab. And really the traction and model there was the adoption that we were looking for of folks at the time, especially in the Air Force, I think even broader in the department at the time, the continuous ATO model or continuous accreditation or certificate to field model was gaining traction and it was gaining adoption.
Yeah.
It was starting to take off in the Army with ECMA led by Paul Puckett. It was taking off in the Navy as Black Pearl came off the ground. Like there was a lot of backing behind it. And
Ken Cato at the time.
Former Kessel Run. So.
Yeah. A lot of folks like
that's
driving the same model that worked for Kessel Run across the department, but commercial companies still struggled to get on the network. And we, in a very early instantiation, said, hey, here's a COCO model to accomplish the same effect. We're going to try to go do that. And those two were the first that clicked the I believe button with us.
Yeah.
And I'll be Ultra was an interesting one because we did not, like I said, like we thought the first customer base was these smaller companies, the saber companies, and then we kind of get approached by a large classic defense prime who's doing some incredibly cool stuff, and they're explaining like they're trying to do this transition, and so for them it's not just hey we need a quick way to accreditation and hosting. It was also like how do we adapt our engineering processes to meet this new CTF, continuous ATO model. And I think it actually worked out pretty well. It's been a really good partnership.
It did, and we learned a ton about how our product grows in the market and how it gets adopted. The same pain point of a startup trying to get a new product onto the network, in many ways is the same pain point that a big has with a new product coming out of IRAD or coming out of another like area of the organization. It doesn't have a requirement tied to it. They don't have an AO on the hook for a specific mission. So it's very hard to like actually iterate that on the network with end users.
Yeah, so I think, you know, I was actually investing in companies like this at the time and like heard the pitch and like the big concern that I know we had, that I'm guessing a lot of others had, was like, are you just helping them build it once and then they're going to rip it out and go, eventually this will be so important, but like, it sounds like based on that, no, right? Like the first two are still doing it. Why are they still coming to Game Warden to do this?
I think for a variety of reasons. One, the delivery model is just much easier that way, particularly for a startup. There's a total cost of ownership that you always have to map out for how am I going to build and deliver this product to my customer base. And for us, our product is generally cheaper than what it would take by orders of magnitude to build on your own from a headcount and tech stack perspective. And then you also get into a great dev cycle. So the teams also get very well iterated with each other. And now we're on probably the 10th version of our platform and the 20th version of their product.
Yeah.
And that dev cycle and deployment cycle has been, not seamless by any stretch. It's still a very difficult deployment, but those teams are tied together. I think and we've delivered over time to those customers, and it's worked out.
And
It's also just really hard to do.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was
Like, it sucks.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Like, it is just, it does though. Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, like, we've got this button and this button makes pain not be felt. No, there's a ton of pain, right? You do it yourself, it sucks. In many situations, if you do it with us, it probably still feels like it sucks. I know it does because it's hard, right? Software is magic in the best ways. Software is magic in the worst ways, right? And an expectation of just unilaterally solving that out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the vision. That's where we want to get. But I think to get at it, like, this is just like shitty hard work. And if you can find a team that can take some of that off you at a TCO far below what you would do to do it yourself, it's just kind of economic. I think there's that plus a degree of just, whether it's trust or like vested interest or just like pot committed, but there is an aspect of like, you pick up the phone and we're going to answer it. And we've got a team that is going to run through a bunch of walls and try to solve. We might not get it right every time. This is a long game. We're going to get way more wrong than we get right. But you get people who are fucking obsessed with the mission. Yeah. And if you've got a phone you can pick up, you get team engineers that, there is nothing they can't do. You want that phone, right? Like,
yeah. But I think that's the critical piece that has made like the most transformative tech are the ones that are solving pain problems. Yeah. Like people get really excited about like driverless cars and like, but what pain problem are you solving with that? You don't want to replace like track driving a Porsche, right? Like nobody needs that. And sometimes, particularly in defense tech, you see a lot of like, hey, we're going to go solve this problem. And like, that's not really a pain problem. Right. You want to go solve the things that really suck. Yeah. Like, one of my favorite companies is Slack, and like they solve a communication problem, which is everybody's biggest problem. That's why there's like 10,000 calendar app that are companies that are all venture backed because everybody hates their calendar and dealing with that. So like pulling that off, I think is super, super important. And I think it took a while for, some of our investors were very early and figured that out. Some of our customers were very early, but I think a lot of folks didn't realize like you're pulling away some of the hardest, most like gut-wrenching work that people have to do to deploy their software. So, yeah.
And it's still, it's when you think about like impact and defense, and that's really, this is like chapter 2 of this story. If you think about this as a story, like it's not done. Like the thing's not accomplished. The change isn't there. The value isn't made. We're further than people thought we were gonna get. But like this is a very early story, and there's still just a lot of pieces that are gonna have to get put into play. There's a ton of work to do, but it's a mission that matters. And I always say, like, if we get this right, there's a huge impact, right? It just changed the way markets and consumers can interact, like in a broader, like super macro national security way. Like it is the software for the free world. Like it rocks.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want it to sound like we're ringing the bell on success.
Oh,
like,
God, no.
Like as happy as a pig in shit to not be dead yet.
Yeah.
But we're still at the beginning of this journey.
We're in the Empire Strikes Back phase of this, where we just got our hand cut off and like are suffering through Hoth to nerd out there. It's the cold part.
Sorry.
Like it's
my parents.
Enrique.
I know he did.
I knew.
Enrique's like, oh, Jabba the Hutt.
I was actually wondering which part of Empire are you talking? Early part of Empire with
the whole
Hoth, or
thing.
the later part where you
all the pain
But
parts.
it's an entire that whole second chapter is the bad part. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about like.
It's like Rambo before he goes into the shaft.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. We're gonna cauterize a wound with gunpowder. I can play that game too.
There we go. We're back.
That's what they teach
Spent a
you.
lot of time on ships watching movies. Which Fast and the Furious episode is this? It's Tokyo Drift. I want to ask that question. So, all right. So, how do you find like the mission-focused people? Because like this is painful. This hurts, right? Like this is brutal work. Customers always want it to go faster. Investors want it to go faster. The end user wants it faster. Like we're just absorbing a lot of that pain. But to your point, like how do you get people that understand how transformative this is on the other side to come and work this problem? And I don't think we have 100% of these answers.
How do we hire them?
Hire them, bring them onto
Yeah,
the team,
so-
take people that aren't, don't understand.
I would love to say we get it right every time, but obviously, like any company, we don't. The type of people who want to join a startup, first of all, like if you actually want to join a startup, and I talk to this, like people leave the military all the time, like I want to go to startup. I'm like, let's think this through.
Yeah.
It is pain. Like you go to a startup, it is going to suck. So there's a kind of people who self-selected. They want to go to the startup. They want to feel that pain. But the second part is the mission part. I think there's a pretty good amount, I don't know the numbers, of our company that actually come out of the military where they lived the other side of this pain. They lived the other side of either they were a techie who couldn't get the software in, they were the security side who had trouble like getting the evidence for accreditation, or they're just the mission user, like, why am I using like 1990s era tech? Why can't I get anything modern? And so I think you kind of got that mix of people. And then there's a whole other crowd of like pure commercial that come here, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure why they come. I'm glad they're here because they bring a whole other perspective. But sometimes it's pain from other industries, like finance.
I think too, there's a chunk of it where I think people are drawn to the mission, right? And there's an aspect of conversation, right? And to me, it's like, I love having a bunch of veterans here. Don't get me wrong. I think that's outstanding. But I think it matters more, especially as, we talk about sort of broader national security and, public good and what that means, that we've got folks from all of these different backgrounds, whether they're uniform, whether they're intelligence officer, whether they're pure play software or salesperson, whatever, they want to do something that fucking matters.
Yeah.
And they want to go do something that, like, if they get it right, it's going to result in a bunch of change. And, like, cool, the part of a startup is, like, you can also, have some economic value created.
Sure.
You can have a life event. But, if you're going to go, I always make the joke, like, the children yearn for the mines. But, like, if you get to pick your mine, like, pick a mine that matters.
Yeah.
Can I give one example of a hire? The very first engineer we hired for Game Warden is a guy named Ryan Morris.
Yes.
So I interviewed
Goddamn
Ryan.
American hero.
Yeah, he's amazing. He'd been engineering for a few years. He'd worked at a gaming kind of company. No background in national security whatsoever.
It was above board. If there were any
It was
doubts.
above board.
Legal game.
That sounded really...
Completely legal gambling.
Pulled him out of rounders.
Thank you.
So I
Teddy
get on the
KGBs.
call. We talk some tech.
I got that one.
Yeah, but I look at his bookshelf, and his bookshelf is a bunch of history books, books about Russia, some stuff on national security, and we actually got into a long conversation about national security, and you could tell that this is someone he'd never served, never been in government, but he was passionate about it. He loved this stuff, and that's like the reason I hired him. Like, oh my God, this guy is he cares so much about the kind of stuff that we're trying to do, and 3.5 years later, maybe 4 years later,
he's still
here.
rocking.
He's awesome. He's an absolutely amazing engineer that really cares. So,
He's unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you want people also that they want to build something new. And that
Great
ends
point.
up attracting that type of persona.
Right.
It's not always perfect, but you do want the masochists to join an early stage company, whether it's defense or not. And folks that want to build something new, if you explain the idea of what you're trying to build and the problem you're trying to solve, and then explain why it's hard and why nobody's ever successfully been able to do it before, and that gets somebody excited, then they're probably a decent fit.
Yeah, I think that's a critical piece, though, is the idea of building something. And, like, there's a lot of pain. This is going to be very difficult, but, like, the autonomy that comes with that. Of, like, you get to be a part of this team, but, like, if you come up with an idea, you can go build that thing. Like, you can, whether you do it by yourself or you join another team that's helping you build it, like, you have that ability at, I joined it up 95, like, employees. Like, and we're getting bigger and bigger, but, like, you still have that ability at this size. I knew when I was looking what I wanted to do next, like 50 to 150. To your point of, like, everybody says they want to go to a startup. I was like, what do you mean by startup? Because, like, sub 50 is very different. Sub 10 is very different.
Now that you're in a startup instead of a VC firm, when are you going to start wearing a T-shirt and get rid of the vest?
Never.
Never?
No.
No, okay.
I was actually born wearing a vest. It was very on brand.
I just like that he has the transition lenses.
I didn't wear those.
We walk outside, I'm like, oh, why'd you put sunglasses on? Like the fifth time I was like, dude, transition lenses.
Tech.
Yeah,
Tech.
it is tech. I would be curious to hear, Tej, I think you spend, and I'm going to ask a question that I'm biased in, right? Because Like I came up as a sales guy. Teacher's my first sales hire. Right, I was an activist CRO, and then a lesson to anyone who's out there being an activist CRO: be careful. If you are too activisty, they give you the fucking job, and then you're the CEO, and now you're like, what do I do now? Experience for you, kind of coming in for a sales hire CRO. Growth, the challenges with, I think, preserving, like in the beginning you alluded to, like you called, you got one of the three of us on the phone.
Yeah.
Or right? Like there wasn't you didn't get a faceless voice. You didn't get an answering machine. Like 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
One of us picked the phone and called you right back. Right? That's a very difficult thing to preserve as you scale. Right? We talk about like getting hires, right? Getting all of that. As someone who spends all the time sort of looking at the customers and thinking about, growth and all of that. Talk about, the challenges and the learning. Like that's just an interesting journey. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Softball, the fucking question.
Yeah, no, I mean, during that time, we went from, $0 in revenue post-seed now to over 130 people. And, so there's multiple stages in that journey. I think a couple of the things we learned early was that sales in GovCon and defense is hard. Sales in cyber is hard. Sales in regulated markets is hard. And we were trying to do all three at the same time.
Yep.
And what we did, I think, well in the early days was we treated sales, we treated biz dev, we treated go-to-market like a science. We didn't treat it like an art. And that bit us later on as we scaled because we had to apply a little bit of art to our go-to-market motion. And over the journey, like there's ebbs and flows there. But I think that served us quite well in the early days. I think the second piece is you can't even put a price on a 10x hire at that level. Like at some point, if you're lucky enough that your product works and you have some traction, you get off the ground outside of the 4 or 5 people that are getting all the phone calls, you have to get to the next level of execution. And there's also layers there. That piece of execution ideally has to scale the next level as well. So your 10x hire has to be a doer, a learner, but also a trainer and a mentor for the next cast.
Yeah.
And we got that right with folks like Josh Roberts, folks like Trevor Alexander. Like we had some unbelievable operators on the sales side that in many ways are some of the only reasons we got through some of those phases. So you have to get conviction. It's super difficult. I think scale is a challenge. I don't know if maybe part of scale is you actually never learn how to do it. You just survive it, and then everyone looks back and they're like, "Oh, we did it."
You're always just not dead.
Oh, yeah, but
you're barely alive.
The goal is to survive.
Yeah.
It's to not die.
Yeah.
And
But
if you
everybody
can
has
do that,
advice on how to do it, though.
Oh, there's
So,
lots of advice
Lots
out
of
there.
advice on how to scale, but
And sometimes there's good advice too.
Sure.
Like there are a lot of folks who they're like, "Hey, I ran over
There
this
is a-
landmine. Don't drive down that road."
Yeah, I mean, there's
But-
also a mindset. You talk about the 10x hire. There is a, whether it's like the 310 or it's like some stuff out of like High Growth Handbook, or to your point on books and ideas, like there's a mindset of like, hey, cool, scale means constant change and sort of like evolution or the molting of an organization. And that, right, it was an Alvin Tofflerism where like change isn't whatever. Change isn't merely necessary, change is life or something like that. Effectively change is constant. And I think if you don't build that in at like an organizational ethos of like, cool, the thing it is right now is not the thing it'll be tomorrow, is most definitely not the thing in a year,
you'll fail.
you fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
And
might
it's
not fail
twofold.
fast. Like you might just be
You might limp along for a while.
boiling in a pot of water and not realize it.
Failing slow is death. But
Yes.
to your point, if you're doing your job right in a startup and you're growing the right way, you should be a different business every 6 months, every 9 months. And then also, if you're a good technology company, your product should be dramatically different every 6 to 9 months. You put those two together, it's a pretty difficult trajectory to manage.
Yeah.
And I think you bounce back and forth between, like, when you talk about those 10x hires and needing that, like, there are stages in the company where you need to be more focused on, like, Moneyball and, like, getting done what you can with what was given to you. and then other stages that are, to use your favorite, like unreasonable hospitality, right? Which are like the opposite end of the spectrum of like, how do you go and you build like the absolute best thing possible? But this isn't a binary thing. You don't jump from one to the other. I think you're moving across that scale. And like I heard Billy Beane speak about Moneyball, and somebody asked him, what's the one thing that everybody gets wrong about this? And he's like, I was the Oakland A's. Like I had like the lowest budget possible. So I was just trying to like sneakily get by and get people on base. He's like, but what everybody doesn't realize, to your point on the 10X hires, is if he had to give a value to like a Derek Jeter, he's like, there is no value. You could give them all the money and you're still gonna make up for that. Yep. Like, yeah. And that's the point that people miss on the Moneyball thing. Is like, yeah, just because you're like narrowly focused on like getting these strategic wins or using math in your favor to make these right hires, there's still the idea of finding these outsized success stories, these folks that are going to be a 10X. And I think that's super important to recognize. The opposite end of that spectrum is like, if you read Unreasonable Hospitality, he talks about like going to that level of perfection. He actually broke his team and realized they were doing stupid shit just because it was really, really hard.
In the name of optimization.
Right, and he had to like bring it back and be like, no, what can I actually do even with a 10X, right? Like you still have to live in reality. And I think that's a spectrum that like, even in just the 10 months that I've been on board, I've seen us sort of move through different, points of this needle.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add there too, that I think we said it out loud in the early days, but I don't think we fully appreciated it, is that you have to be fucking obsessed with the outcome.
Yes.
And with the customer.
But the outcome isn't
every stakeholder that's involved.
The outcome isn't like second front winning. The outcome is the customer winning and the customer's winning, and like the mission, like the market, like it. Yeah. It has to be almost debilitating. Yeah, it
has to be
irrational. It's beyond irrational. It's borderline. Like
yeah, but I think
you have to be a fucking true believer.
But I think the hard thing for us also in the marketplace we're playing in, like we actually like that obsession about winning. There's actually like two sides of it. Like our customers have to win, but it actually has to be valuable to the government as well. Because the government is our other customer. There's accreditors, there's end users, there's cloud hosting providers.
But I think it's how we define winning, right? Like when I say our customers win, like baked into that assumption is the value that they're creating is effectively being transferred, received, and valued by their end users.
Yeah.
Right? And if we're creating a vibrant marketplace and we do this right, then everybody should win before we do, which is the obsession.
Yeah.
It's the willingness to like, if we do this right, we eat last.
Yeah.
And like that fucking freaks people out. It's like, oh, well, we should do this or charge that. And like, no, it's heretical. Yeah. Like I do have this shit for free because it matters. And if we get it right, it's just, it changes absolutely everything.
It's definitional too. We are a platform company, right? We're a platform product. It's the Bill Gates quote in '95 about operating systems, where if you do a platform correctly, all of the participants of the ecosystem in a platform gain greater economic value than the platform itself.
Which rocks.
That is what we're driving for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. It's a beautiful dream.
Yeah. We're working on it.
Yeah.
Every day.
Somebody's dream. I think the other thing to do it's important, and I know brand launch, celebratory is just a recognition of like, when you do stuff that matters, it's gonna be harder. And I mean, you guys chime in, but like, dude, every time I get up and can high five myself in the mirror that like we're changing the world, I can also look at myself and be like, we're failing everybody. We're falling short. Like it is that unreasonable sort of obsession. It is you're kind of chasing a dragon. You're never gonna, at least for me, I've never felt like we've gotten there.
Never.
Getting there. I feel like we're not dead. We used to mutter, not dead yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, actually, I'll bring something up on this. Like, we all served. Like in the military, you're never in a job more than a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years if you're lucky, and they don't force you to move. Like you and I, we've been here over 4. I've been here 4.5 years now, and the reason is I love it. I love what we're doing, but part of it's also chase that dragon. It's like I know that there's always on the horizon something better to do, another mission to accomplish, another market to get into, and I think that's one of the things that really drives me. But that I'm here, it's like there's always another warfighter that needs better technologies. Like how do we get it to them?
Yeah.
How do we help our customers deliver? And like you all see that next one coming, and so I love it.
Yeah.
There's no other way to live.
Ride or die.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah.
agreed.
I mean, I couldn't imagine doing a job or being in a profession where that wasn't the reality.
No.
And those are
Once
the
you get
type of
bit-
people
once
that
you
we
get
try
bit,
to
it's a drug.
attract. Yeah.
Yeah. It is hard. Like there are successes, and like when we have them, it feels great. It's like near instantaneous that it's on to the next thing. Like whether it's a successful fundraise, a great deployment, something some of these recent deployments we've had were like 2 years in the making, and it hits, and like everybody celebrates, congratulate whoever it was, and I swear it's like 5 minutes later it's on to the
It's
next.
usually
If you don't cry in the shower at least once a week, you're absolutely not in a real company
It's
building
amazing
something
high
hard.
and low in the same
Yeah.
day. It's
Ding,
incredible.
ding, ding.
Yeah. Well, you can't have that without that, right?
Can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good segue into. All right, this was really hard. We definitely haven't won that much. We've just been.
Probably lost more than we won.
We've lost a
by
lot
an
more
order
than
of
we won.
magnitude.
Definitely
man.
not one.
But
We have definitely got the shit kicked out of us way more than.
So
But
we're
it's-
celebrating not being dead yet? Is that what it's
yes.
Yeah.
But I also
it's the
think it's a commitment that we're not gonna quit, and that there's so much more to do, and we see that there's more to do, and we've got the fortitude, and we've got just the passion and the principles and the team and just the commitment to go fucking get after it. And I think that is right. The relaunch for me. So I want to just pour that bottle straight into my gullet. The relaunch and all that, and the brand and all that is just the encapsulation of the. It's a recognition of while it will always be not dead yet, it is also now a look what's possible,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that is the dragon, of like this could just be so great for so many communities and so many people, and it's not like a throwaway change the world. Like if you can make it easier for better technology to quickly just go support societies and government. It doesn't be national security. It can be, how do folks in disparate regions interact with their government? How is knowledge transferred? How are services transferred? There's all kinds of shit that falls in there.
Yeah.
That rocks. And that's cheaper, better, faster for the government. 'Cause at some point, we can't keep
For
spending
everyone.
so much money. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, that's what whenever anybody talks about, like, well, what if there's ATO reform or this change? It was like, great, all of that can happen.
Yeah.
It should happen.
We need
like,
it to happen.
that should
Right.
definitely happen.
It
Yes.
needs to happen.
They're
Yes.
somewhat
Yeah.
surprised when they're like, wait, you're actually actively pushing it. It's like, we're actively lobbying for it. Like, we are
Yeah.
pushing for these things to happen because what we really have is a security platform and a trust platform. And that doesn't go away. Like, the networks still need to be secure. You still need to be able to build software with, 4 people in a garage.
Sounds like software Bane.
The ATO is yours. Give it back to the people.
Well, no, I think you're right about the whole lobbying and policy change.
people.
Like, if we do this right, and we can demonstrate that there are ways to go faster, there are ways to get actually better security with different methodologies, we should make this whole thing faster. We should be able to change those policies. Yeah, that's where we have to take the DoD.
We've
So-
said it from day one of this journey.
Yeah.
There should be more second fronts.
Yeah.
There should be more pathways for software to get where it
Yeah.
needs to go.
You build it and give it away. You land roads.
Yes,
Yeah,
It's a public
agreed.
benefit.
Yeah.
100%.
this has to exist.
100%. Well, here's to the future, fellas.
Cheers.
Cloud.
Gents,
Cheers.
Cloud.
not dead yet.
Well, cheers, everybody.